Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and today I'm reviewing Mind MGMT from Jay Cormier and Sen-Fung Lim, and from Off the Page Games, the publisher, and all that. And this is a hidden movement game. This is a hidden movement game of two teams. You're going to have the recruiter. I always get mixed up with the names here because we have recruiters, agents, rogue agents, all those things. The recruiter is trying to remain hidden as they traverse the city, and the rogue agents are trying to capture the recruiter either before time runs out, or alternatively, before the recruiter captures a variable number of agents, depending on whether you're playing the intro game or the regular game, either 9 or 12 basically. And so what happens is the agent, the recruiter is going to be moving around on this board over here, marking the movement as they move around from location 1 to 2 to 3, tracking it on their own hidden little board. They'll be hidden behind this player screen over here, and tracking the movement as they wander around trying to collect various agents. They're trying to recruit agents, not the rogue agents. I know the terminology is confusing. The rogue agents are trying to track down the recruiter's trying to track these regular agents over here. These are the rogue agents over here. Again, we'll catch up soon enough. But either way, the way the recruiter is trying to track those agents down is by visiting various locations. You see, at the beginning of the game, from the various symbols you'll have over here, you're going to be revealing a few different symbols that are the places you're going. So, for example, birds, pools, and fountains are the spaces where I'm going to be recruiting different agents. So, as I move around the board, I have a bird, I have a fountain, I have another bird over here, I have a pool, different things we're trying to move around the board, collecting various agents as we go. The problem with that is, as we move around the board, while the other players, while the rogue agents do not know what we've done exactly, they're trying to deduce what we've done, we are piling up the agents that we've recruited, giving a bit of a hint to the way we're traversing the board. Which brings us to the rogue agent's turn. You see, on the rogue agent's turn, they can move around the board themselves. They get to move 2 spaces, where the recruiter only moves 1. They get to move 2 spaces, and then they get to perform an action. So the sequence is recruiter takes 1 action, takes 1 move, and then just done. And then the rogue agents will take 2 movement each, followed by an action each, twice. And then again, recruiter moves, and then rogue agents move 2 and 2 back and forth, making sure that the rogue agents have more that they can do, which they'll need it because they don't know what's happening. What can they do on their turn? Well, they can start by visiting a location and saying, I'm going to move 1, 2, and I'm going to say, have you been to any pools? At that point, the recruiter has to reveal if they've been to any pools, specifically by putting down a footprint token on any one pool that they haven't visited already. For example, over here, we can see we actually can't. If we had a token on a pool already, then we'd have to put down a new token on the board. So, for example, if that token is already there, we say, yes, actually, we have visited this pool. But from there, they just know we've gone there. They don't know what turn we've gone there. And so they're still trying to figure out, but they have a bit more information. The other action they can take, though, is they can move to a location and say, what turn were you there? At which point, they can reveal, if they ask by a footprint, we'll reveal the footprint. They'll go ahead and take a new token, and I'll say, I was actually on their turn 5. And since they already know that we were here turn 3, that we were here turn 5, there's a more than decent chance that I've gone 3, 4, 5, and this is 6 and 7, assuming they had all this information on the board. So as you take these reveal actions, as you take these ask actions, you'll be revealing more and more information about where they visited, potentially what turn they visited, which brings us to the final action, which is when they can go 1, 2, and they say, I'm attempting to capture you at that location. At which point you either say you've got me or you haven't, and the game continues or the game ends, depending on whether you've captured the recruiter. So again, hidden movement, recruiters trying to wander around, capturing agents or evading the rogue agents until time runs out. The agents are moving around, trying to figure out which landmarks the recruiter has gone to, and then additionally trying to reveal those and go from there, and that is all the intro game. That's it. That's just the intro game. We haven't even talked about the rest of what's going on here because there is more going on, which is where we get these characters over here. So the immortals over here will be placed on the board in the advanced game, and then it's going to totally change up the experience you're having. You see, the base game is pretty simple. You're doing what you do over here, but the immortals will introduce new elements. These immortals are going to both help and hurt the recruiter. What they're going to do is they're going to be able to wander around recruiting agents themselves. Additionally, they will block the rogue agents from being able to ask questions about the various symbols of the icons that they are on, so that allows a little bit of protection there. Additionally, if they are on the spot where you are on, or wherever they are, other agents cannot move there and attempt to capture you, giving you again more protection or the illusion of protection. The problem is they can also be used by the rogue agents, by the rogue agents to go ahead and do shakedowns. Shakedowns are where you go to an immortal, you shove them out of the square they're in, which can be important because of the board positioning, but also you get to say, well, are you actually, is one of your 3 cards the confusion idols over there? at which point the recruiter has to reveal it or say no it isn't, either way giving the rogue agents more information, and more importantly, if you do reveal one of their cards, they can no longer recruit agents at that location. And that involves another way of slowly reducing the amount of things that the recruiter can be doing, trying to track them down and push them down. There's a few other things going on. The temples are a spot you can go into diagonally, in or out of these temples diagonally. Other spots on the board you can only move orthogonally, which is not diagonal movement. And additionally, you can never ever, the recruiter can never ever backtrack into a space they've already visited that game at all. Every space will be entered once and once only, and that's basically it. A few other small things. We have mind slip tokens. There's going to be different potential recruiter options that you have, each of them giving you different abilities you can utilize, and so those mind slip tokens will give you the ways that you can basically say, hey, I'm taking a mind slip action this turn, which means that you've been able to move further, and the other agents, the rogue agents, don't even know exactly how and where you moved. And then from there, and this is a big one, we have all these shift boxes. These are shift boxes that we have in the game, just tons of different boxes you can slowly but surely add to your experience, either for the sake of pure variability, or because of the fact that you want to balance the game against the fact that in your group, in your dynamic, you have the recruiter winning more often, or you have the rogue agents winning more often, and this will give you ways to, again, give you general variability, but also to give a slight edge to one side versus the other, until the other side starts catching up, and then you open another box. So again, both variability and game balancing, and that's a general overview of how you play Mind MGMT. A little bit of hidden movement, a little bit of deduction, figuring things out, and attempting to win before the other player escapes, wins, does whatever, and all of that. Which brings us to the review part of things, starting with my game preferences and bias, and hidden movement is an interesting one for me. This game is hidden movement, and hidden movement games for me have always fallen into an interesting zone where I have generally enjoyed every single hidden movement game I've played, but I generally haven't kept them all. Most of the time they eventually leave, because I find they often fall into a zone where one side is kind of doing what they need to do to escape, and the other side has no idea what's going on until eventually they kind of stumble into a victory. I find that it tends to be a little bit anticlimactic as you hit the end game. Always a bit of a thrill, but not always the game balance or feeling I end up going for. So hidden movement for me has had a mixed track record, liking it, but rarely keeping them. From there, let's start off with art and components. The art and components is another very binary thing about this game, a very mixed results as far as the general opinion of the art is all over the place. I started off with hating the art. The first time I saw this game over on Kickstarter when it first launched, hate's a strong word, but I thought the art it didn't do it for me at all. Now, for the most part, the art of the board itself has actually grown on me, especially in the functionality of having a very dry beige board with every single spot having two things that stick out very obviously. So it's both does a great job of capturing the spy feel of things while also being very functional. Now, I'm still very mixed on other aspects, including things like card art, or even just the characters. The characters who have two different sides to them, which may, potentially as I reveal more shift boxes, maybe that actually has an impact. I've only played through some of the shift boxes, but overall, the character art and the different sides I find harder to track what's going on, having the immortals with their skeleton heads on one side, but then these other pictures on the other side, just makes it hard to really track what's going on with all these tokens on the board. I don't love the functionality aspect of the characters. The board has grown on me. As far as components, they do the job. Nothing particularly amazing. These pieces write on and clean off very nicely. Everything works there as far as you'd expect. Solid job, all of that. As far as theme and narrative, this is a game, Mind MGMT is based on an IP. It's based on, I don't know if it's a comic or something. It's based on a series of graphic novels or something along those lines that I have not read. And as someone who has not read it, this stuff is nonsense to the point of not only being nonsense, but to the point of being confusing. The aspect that I'm a recruiter trying to recruit agents, and then you have the other player who's the rogue agents, and then you have these things called the immortals. None of this makes any sense, and if anything, the terminology of the rogue agents and the recruiter, all that stuff ends up being a little bit confusing. So I would say that the theme and narrative going on in this game, while it might be immensely true to the IP, to the thing itself, for someone like myself who hasn't read it, I find it to just not really work for me. So it's a weird balance of, I'm sure people who understand what's going on here, who've read the graphic novel, whatever it is, I'm sure they know more about that. For me, it ends up being more confusing than it is helpful. As far as narrative, there's not much in the way of narrative. You're just doing your thing. Again, maybe that narrative feels like it's there if you're familiar with the IP. Not, so I don't get anything out of that. As far as ease of play, rules are a bit of a mixed bag because of the fact that they have two game modes. They have the training mode, and then they have the regular game, and then continuously mixed up from these shift boxes as well. But that means the rule book does have different sections where you're kind of reading through it and either paying attention to the green boxes or the red boxes, depending on what you're playing. It's very well formatted for the sake of trying to give you those two different game modes, but I will say that it doesn't make repeated readings very clear as you try to mentally shift from playing the training game to playing the advanced game. It's a little bit confusing and hard to get through when you're going through it. Not the worst, but definitely not the best either. Past that, I would say the rules are fairly streamlined. Again, a little bit of a mixed bag because they're teaching you two games in one format. But past that, I would say that the game is fairly easy to pick up. Other than those things, it is mostly easy to teach, although again, you will still have that aspect of teaching someone the training game, which is ridiculously easy to teach, and then jumping from there to the more regular game, which has a lot of stuff being thrown into the game, not all of which is as intuitive as the base game, so potentially a little harder there. As far as table space, game time, all of that, table space is fairly decent for what it's doing over here. This screen at times will be a little large, especially depending on how you're setting up the board and what you're doing on the table, but overall table space is not that bad, and game length is pretty decent. I haven't had a single game go over an hour, and I would say most games fall into the 30 to 45 minute range, at least for ourselves. That might change if you play at higher player counts. I have not played at 4 and 5 players, which brings us directly to player count. This is a 1 to 5 player game. I don't know if the solo mode currently exists. I believe it's coming in the form of an app. I haven't played solo. I've only played this at 2 and 3 players, and both were excellent. 2 and 3 players are both excellent experiences. 2 is direct head-to-head, a battle of wits, and then 3 starts introducing an element of the rogue agents talking it out and being like, well, no, he probably went there. What if they went there? No, do you think that? It has that degree of collaboration and talking to each other, adds a degree of camaraderie that's also fun as the recruiter to be sitting across from 2 players who are discussing their plans, and you're like, they're either really, really close or really, really far, and you don't want to give away where they are. At 4 and 5 players, I have not played it at those player counts. I would say, judging from what I've played and then from other hidden movement games I've played in the past, I assume they work fine, but they also add a lot of, what's the expression, too many cooks in the kitchen. You potentially have too many voices on the rogue agency side, because the more players you add, they're always on the rogue agents picking up these various agents so you can track down the recruiter, and the more voices you have talking things out, potentially the more confusing the general table space will be, could potentially add slowdown. Again, I haven't played at those player counts. I'm just extrapolating from other hidden movement games I've played in the past. As far as what I like, what I can see others not liking, and meaningful critiques. To begin with, this has been giving me a near even win rate on our games. We've played this game a bunch, and every single time, I don't know where it is. I have to I track my plays, I track my wins. I don't track which side I played at any point, but I feel this has been nearly even as far as the recruiter and the rogue agents, which has been a problem in some of the hidden movement games I've played in the past, where one side feels unbalanced compared to the other. Versus this game, not only has it been near even, but every game has felt, at least for myself, every game has felt like I almost won. Regardless of whether I won or lost, regardless of what side I was playing on, I always felt like I almost won. If I was the recruiter, even if I got caught, I was almost gone, and then you caught me. If I was the rogue agent and I didn't manage to catch the recruiter, I was so close, and then those last 2 moves, you jumped across the board, you used a shift action, you did something, but I always feel like I'm in the game, which again has been a general complaint I've had about this genre before. The idea that sometimes as the recruiters, sometimes as the hunters, or whatever you want to call the faction, you feel completely lost in hidden movement games, and sometimes as the person trying to hide, you feel completely trapped. I have never had that feeling in Mind MGMT. It has always felt like I had a chance, regardless of what side I'm on, and I like that feeling. It's not about the winning or the losing, it's about feeling like you're in the game, and not feeling like the odds are stacked against you, like things just don't work out in your favor. The amount of last turn wins we've had is also surprising. The amount of times this has come down to the very edge, as somebody's like, well, if you don't catch me now, and boom, we caught you. You're like, wait a second, if you moved here, 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 and you jumped there, and you did this here, I mean, I only got 1 turn left, I'll try to capture you, and boom, it happens. It is so rewarding when it happens for both sides. Like, literally, this is a game that has had multiple high five moments as some team figures out one way to either evade or capture the other team, and everyone feels like it was a cool end play. It's just amazingly fun when you have those moments in the game. And the escalation of these shift boxes keeps you coming back. The escalation, and I haven't gone through all of these yet, I've only gone through a handful, but they give you new ways to mix up the experience, new ways to complete completely change the puzzle. Going from the intro game, not the base game. The intro game is already a fun and challenging experience. Mixing it up by throwing in the regular standard game further adds a degree of, okay, what is going on here and how do I play this game to actually try to win? And then the shift boxes, in small but meaningful ways, add new mechanics, new things, new cards, new stuff to the game that changes things from setup, changes things from the cards of play, changes the various tokens you have, the methods at your disposal. I won't go into them. I'll leave them for you to discover them and figure it out, spoiler free, all that. But they are a lot of fun, at least the ones I've seen so far. And the amount of general tactics in this game, there is a ton. This is a game that when you first teach people the game, when you first go through how it plays and all of that, especially as the rogue agents, you're kind of like, I mean, how do I track you down? Like, what am I supposed to do or figure this out? But it works. As you start the process of revealing different locations, as you then ask where you've been, as you then start manipulating the immortals if you're playing the advanced game, as you start trying to guess which locations you've been in, as you see cards revealed and you realize, oh, you're not tracking down those swimming pools, you must be tracking down birds instead. All those things add to a puzzle where you start tracking and tracing a movement across the board, figuring out not just what they've done, but what they are likely to have continued doing in order to achieve their goals, and it's such a rewarding experience when you do that. As far as what I can see others not liking, really two things over here. The first is that it can get easy to be lost between the mix of facts and theory. As you go through the game, you're going to be making little mental notes on these little cards over here, marking both where players have actually gone, what you know for a fact, as well as the fact that you're like, well, I'm 90% sure that you were over here on turn 8. You'll mark it on the green side with a little question mark. You're not sure. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. And then suddenly, before you know it, 3 turns from now, you've extrapolated out that if you're on turn 8 here, you must be on turn 9. And then you jumped here with the shift action turn 10. And it's very easy to get lost on the fact that you just spent the last 3 turns trying to make a judgment, trying to make a prediction, not based on what you know to be true, but based on what you assume to be true. And if you're wrong, everything collapses like a house of cards and you have no idea where you leave off. Now the good news is that it always is easy to kind of pick up a little bit through those reveal actions, through trying to figure things out, but absolutely if you the mix of facts and theory let players get lost sometimes, and that might be frustrating for you, especially if you're not able to pick up and retrace what you did, what happened there. And then the reverse is true as well. Sometimes blind luck can result in the fact that early game, you just know way too much. The shortest game, and the only game to the exception of you always feel like you're winning, the shortest game I've played of Mind MGMT was roughly 12 minutes long, as on turn 3 or whatever it was, I managed to figure out exactly where somebody was because I got lucky. I asked the right questions, they were in the wrong spot at the right time, and boom, they were captured. It was over, and that can happen. It's only happened once to us, but it can happen, and something to be mindful of. As far as meaningful critiques, things that bothered me, things that take away from the experience, there's really 2 things here. The first is the fact that the art, and I mentioned this already, the art is sometimes in the way. I don't love the character art, and I do find myself frequently trying to check which character I am, or is that an immortal or a character or a rogue agent on the board. The general board art works for me, but the character art can get a bit in the way of the game. And then additionally, there's not enough stuff to track what I want as the rogue agents. As the recruiter, you have everything you need on this board. It's plain, it's simple. As the rogue agents, the amount of theories I have, the amount of things I'm trying to trace down, these tokens are not enough. I almost want my entire own separate pad. I want a separate pad of this where I can track my own little board and be like, well, you probably started over here. I want to be scribbling down on my own separate board. I would love to buy another one of these so that I can track it as the rogue agent, because I need to figure more out than what the game allows for it. So I could take a piece of paper and draw things out, but I really wish we had another one of these so that the rogue agents could track things at the same time. As far as final thoughts and score, this game, Mind MGMT, is absolutely amazing. It is one of the best hidden movement games I've played. It is so rewarding to go through it. Every game feels like a tight rush down to the bottom. The game is constantly shifting the experience so you can never get stuck in your ways. You can never get stuck in the strategy that's worked for you. The base intro game is a ton of fun. Genuinely a ton of fun. It could, if you didn't want to escalate it, you can play the base game without anything else for like a good 5-10 games before you even went to the regular game. And the regular game could be enough for another 15-20 games easily. There's a lot of strategy and a lot of back and forth, but you don't need to play it that long. You can easily start adding these shift boxes as you want to continuously mix up, to shift up the experience as you go through it. Mind MGMT is rewarding, and it keeps the players invested and involved the entire time. As I'm playing this game, like I said, with that one odd exception with the 12-minute win or whatever it was, every single time I feel like I'm in the game. And like I said already, this is a game where more than once we've had high fives as teams won. Like, I can't believe you figured that out. Or you start comparing notes at the end of the game and you're like, no, oh my gosh, okay, you're tracking me perfectly up to over here, that's great, but then suddenly I took a jump over there and you didn't realize, oh my gosh, you compare notes, you talk it out, you have fun. This is an excellent experience. Mind MGMT is absolutely a 5 out of 5 for me. It rivals Beast as far as the best hidden movement games I've played, which brings us to recommendations. If you want other recommendations for other games, Beast is the other best hidden movement game I've played. Very different than Mind MGMT, but also amazing in its own right. That's a game you can currently late pledge on Kickstarter. It's not currently available to buy. I apologize, but it is the recommendation I'll give. And if you want something that feels a little similar to Mind MGMT in terms of general high notes of the smoothness of the experience, Letters from Whitechapel is an oldie but a goodie, a classic that you can check out from Fantasy Flight Games. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this helpful, and as always, have a good one.